Hello, thank you for joining and welcome to our first Smiley Talk of 2022, where we're going to be talking about food and the planet. So we're going to be looking at the best diet for the planet, sustainability tips when it comes to buying and cooking food, and just in general, how learning more about how the food we eat impacts the environment around us. So we have three wonderful speakers with us today. It's an all-female panel. We've got Ruth, Emily and Nishat, and we'll have some introductions from them shortly. But just a quick intro from me. So we're Smiley Movement and we run these Smiley Talks twice a month. We're a not-for-profit sponsored by the original Smiley brand, and everything we do has the aim of inspiring people to drive positive change in the world and in their communities. We align all our work with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So no poverty, zero hunger, gender equality, climate action. This talk in particular aligns with the goals responsible consumption and production and climate action. We also do this through, we publish positive news on our Smiley news site, and we have a podcast called Define Optimism, so lots of positivity here. But back to the talk, so we'll have some introductions from our speakers, and then we're going to go into a panel discussion for around 35 to 40 minutes. But if you do have any questions, wherever you're watching, we're streaming live on Twitter, Facebook and YouTube. Just pop your questions in the comments and we will get to them near the end of the hour. So I'm going to hand over to our speakers now, and Ruth, I'm going to come to you first, only because you're first on my screen. So can you introduce yourself and just tell us a bit about who you are and the organisation you work for?
Hi everyone, it's so nice to be here. Thanks for inviting us, Amy. It's so good to be doing a really positive webinar to start off 2020. So my name's Ruth Westcott and I work for Sustain, which is the Alliance for Better Food and Farming. And we're an organisation that represents about 100 food and farming organisations in the UK. And we campaign on issues around health and environment and workers' rights around the food sector. And I think the reason I first kind of got interested in the food sector in this in particular was that it really sort of got on my nerves that good food was always branded as something which is for posh people or something which is kind of elite. And that really gets on my nerves. I think good food should be for everybody. I always kind of roll my eyes when people say, oh, vegan food, and then say that that's something which is kind of elitist and just for posh people. No, I think good food should be for everybody.
It's a good quote. Good food should be for everybody. Thank you. Emily, did you want to go next and introduce us about who you are and your organisation?
Hello, my name is Emily Warburton Adams. I'm the co-founder and head of sustainability at Power Food. So we specialise in performance nutritional catering initially and home delivery ready meal services. We started 4 years ago and we, since day one, have supported our charity partner City Harvest. So for every purchase through POW, we donate a percentage to City Harvest, which helps feed underprivileged children and homeless people within London. They work with different organisations. And we're a company who focus on food waste, transparency, responsible sourcing, and nutritional food. So that there are kind of our pillars. And it's been, a passion of mine for years. And through POW, we're incredibly passionate about making healthy food accessible, educating our customers about what they're eating, why they're eating it, and where we're sourcing our produce. And yeah, that's me.
Fantastic, thank you. And Nishat, did you want to go next and introduce yourself?
Hello, thanks for having me. I'm Nishat, I'm the brand marketing officer at the Vegan Society. We provide information and advice on going vegan in lots of different ways. We support vegans through our legal network and anyone who's facing discrimination, down to really practical tips and advice like recipes and guides and things like that. I've always been excited about food and cooking. When I was sort of from childhood, my parents made really cheap but nutritious meals, and so I've always found that the sustainable sort of diet and meals have always been the more exciting ones for me personally anyway. And then I've always loved sort of nature, and I think a natural result of that love for it is wanting to do what I can to sort of protect it.
Lovely, thank you. And I can imagine the Vegan Society has been incredibly busy in Veganuary, as loads of people are coming to the site trying to find recipe ideas, which I know I've done in the past. Well, thank you all for your introductions. So to kick things off, and one of the first questions I thought I would say is, well, it's a two-part question. What did you have for breakfast? And also, I know some of you touched on it there, but like, why do you think people should care and have an interest into this passion for food and the environment? And you can talk about your own passion too. So I will start and say, for breakfast, I had overnight oats. It's quite boring, really. I did it last night, so didn't have to make it this morning. And I just, I mean, in Veganuary, I just had an interest, and why we're running this talk in Veganuary is because a lot of people sort of think about just their diets in general in January, and whether they want to take on Veganuary, whether they want to take on Veggie January. So I thought it'd be an interesting time to run this talk. So Nisha, I'll come to you first. What did you have for breakfast, and why do you think people should sort of take an interest and care into looking into food and the environment around them?
So for breakfast, I had toast with some dairy-free spread and some, it's going to sound really bougie, but some lavender vegan honey.
Oh, sounds great.
Good food for all, not bougie.
I really loved like honey on toast with margarine when I wasn't vegan. And then when I discovered vegan honey and a lavender vegan honey, it was, very exciting.
It's the spot.
And sorry, what was your question again?
So why, well, obviously you touched on your sort of passion for food and the planet. Why do you think, why do you want to raise awareness of food and the impact potentially the food we eat has on the planet and the environment around us?
So when I first went vegan, it was initially because of the animal sort of compassion side of things. But what I slowly learned when I started sort of looking into veganism and things was that our diet actually has a massive impact on the planet. And a vegan diet is the most kind of sustainable diet that you can have. And so, that sort of kind of got me, because I'd never even considered that sort of angle before. And it's sort of, the more you learn, the more you sort of find out, and things that you didn't even think about affecting the planet kind of do. I think I did have a statistic, but I can't remember off the top of my head. But obviously animal agriculture has a huge impact on the environment. It's one of the main causes of deforestation. I think just here we use over 1 million hectares of South American rainforest, whether that's for grazing space for animals that we eat here in the West, or growing their feed. And so it's obviously a huge impact. And I think we don't see it so much directly because it's sort of happening away from us. But I think once you sort of know that, it's difficult to sort of separate that from your everyday life and the impacts that your choices have.
It's a good point about not seeing it. I think a lot over the past few years where people are learning more about what is good and what's not good for the planet is people are like searching out this information because it's not always readily available, is it? It's definitely something that I've done, and learning more as you realize that all the organizations and people doing things to sort of combat that. Emily, I'll come to you next. What did you have for breakfast, and sort of what sparks your interest into food and sustainability?
I had some vegan banana bread, actually. I always think banana bread is quite good because I know that as a company, we use all kind of banana produce that would otherwise be thrown away. So it's quite good to use, and for me, I mean, I've had a core interest in nutrition and food for years, which stemmed from an eating disorder. I think with that, I sort of educated myself, and then obviously the awareness and information out there has exponentially grown over the last few years. And then running a company myself, I became incredibly aware around the sourcing of ingredients, the effect on the environment, food waste in the industry. And wanting to educate and be transparent about it. I think it's incredibly important that we're more conscious. I mean, most of the food waste is from households, and overconsumption is a huge problem. And where there's food more readily available than ever, and yet the resources are diminishing. So I just think we have to be a lot more conscious about where we're sourcing our food, if we need that food, and how and what we're doing with it. So that's where I think kind of food waste is a big area that I care about. And then obviously, the responsibility and where we source our food, but that is kind of, it's systemic, and it takes there's change on a corporate level as well as the little changes that we can make ourselves. It's just little things from what we're buying if we are in a supermarket, and if we do need to go to the supermarket, or if we can go to our local stores and support local suppliers and businesses in a different way.
Yeah, definitely. And what you said there about being conscious is, like, I think it's a really important point, because for so long you do a lot of habits automatically, don't you? And then it's like stopping to think, what am I actually doing? What am I buying? Where am I buying my food? Like, it is a mindset and a habit change, isn't it? And
because it's just become so readily available, and it's changed. It's so different from how it was years ago, and it just means that we almost have to backtrack and become a bit more like we were. And changes can be incremental or radical, and lots of people find radical changes very difficult to sustain. So I think just being conscious and aware first is a first step.
Definitely. And Ruth, I'll come to you last. So what did you have for breakfast? Was it banana bread? Was it vegan honey on toast? Was it overnight oats? Or can you surprise us with something new? And where does your sort of passion and interest come from?
I'm actually just coming out of COVID, so I'm eating up the entrails of the back of the freezer and the fridge, which is very good for food waste. There's lots of stuff in there that you buy for a recipe and you don't think you don't use for a year, and it's now going in the saucepan because there isn't enough. So I had some toast from the back of the freezer with some peanut butter, and it was very nice, if a little bit manky. I thought it was really interesting what you were saying, Emily, there about the sort of corporate responsibility and the need to look at the reasons why we have such access to cheap but very environmentally damaging food so easily and so affordably and so attractive, and it's so attractive and so convenient. And for me, a lot of the thing that makes me very inspired to try and change the food system is how much we've been told to believe that the choices that we make in our diet are our own choices, and we should feel guilty if we eat a bad diet. And I think that's particularly a gender issue, because so often when you talk about the diets of children, it's the parents that are irresponsibly feeding their children junk food. And we know the subtext there that it's women, because they're expected to be still the main caregivers and the main cooks in the household. And it's no coincidence that the diet industry for generations has been directed at women, and we've been told to feel like we should feel a certain way about our dietary choices. And generally it's, you're not doing the right thing, you should feel guilty, you should be eating differently. And yet at the same time, what is available to us and what's affordable and what's attractive and marketed and on the t-shirts of our favorite footballers and in the high street is overwhelmingly cheap, ultra processed, unhealthy, climate wrecking food. And so I think we need to stop feeling guilty and start feeling inspired and start feeling a bit angry about the way that the food's presented to us, and what's there is not what we should be. Good choices should be easier for everyone, and that's the responsibility of massive corporations, particularly the big supermarkets, and the government for letting those big corporations have run the high street and have the power to make food so cheap, when other organizations that are more ethical, that are paying a living wage, that source locally and are supporting farmers with agroecological products, organic produce, shorter supply chains and lower waste, are priced out of the market and can't compete. And there's lots that local governments can do, and certainly a lot that national government can do to make our food environments healthier and more sustainable, and they're not doing it. And I'm saying this particularly now because the government are releasing a new white paper in March, I think. It's due in March, and that will be a response to the National Food Strategy that was released over summer. And when the strategy was released, the government sort of, I mean, they said they're looking at it, and then a few questions were raised about, wouldn't it be great if we had a better food system? And it was eye roll, and we're not going to tell people what to eat. And that is such a dereliction of duty of the government when they could be doing so much to support our farmers and to support better diets. And it's time that we started to say it's not good enough for government to see this as a kind of niche joke issue. It's so important to our lives and to our health and how long we live and what our rural communities look like, that the government needs to take it seriously. And that's really my motivator at the moment.
I feel motivated. You can see Emily nodding along there as well. I think what you said about the guilt is, I was just thinking about everyone here. We've got organizations here where people go to Power Food because they want sustainable, locally sourced, meal prepped food. People go to the Vegan Society for tips to have for a plant-based diet. People go to Sustain for that information. And what I just realized is it's coming on us, and people might feel that guilt because they're searching for options that are better for the environment and reading up and learning, because like you said, what's available to them isn't necessarily climate friendly, and it makes them feel that guilt that they're not making the right choice, which is incredibly interesting. And one thing I did want to touch on is so it's Veganuary, and I know I mentioned this already, and it is typically a month where Nisha, I'm sure you probably have all the more stats than me, but a lot of people take part in Veganuary, and more people sort of continue that vegan diet going through, or people might do meat-free Mondays, they might do veggie January. And there was this huge study a couple of years ago that I remember reading, I think it was in 2018, that said, and I think you said this as well, Nishat, that being vegan is the single biggest way to reduce your impact on the environment as an individual. But for many people, like we said about the sort of mindset shift and the habit shift and the lifestyle change, it's not easy for some people to just go from eating meat to completely plant-based. What advice would you have? Nishat, maybe I'll come to you first. What advice would you have for people in that situation? Because a lot of us are aware that this is a good diet for the planet, but it's hard to go completely plant-based or sort of make that jump.
Yeah, I mean, someone who hasn't always been vegan, I definitely understand that shift. It can be really difficult, especially if you're not armed with like the knowledge of how to do it, or sometimes even what exactly vegan or plant-based means. But I think definitely sort of research is your best friend. Just having some knowledge on what it is and what it means is a great start. And then just, I think for me, it was just making a start. I did sort of go, I'm going vegan overnight, and then realized some of the challenges along the way. But once I made a start, it became easier and learned more about it. I think because I think I mentioned that my parents cooked a lot with amazing ingredients and flavors, and that really helped me. I think just try and have fun with it. Like Ruth was saying, there's the guilt. I think it can be really counterproductive. So I think just sort of approach it from the most positive angle, as though you're doing something great for you, your body, and it's a great choice. You're kind of taking that power as a consumer, and sort of you have control over it. I think it's definitely fun to like get involved and try all the new sort of and exciting products that are coming out, but also master some of the basics. Like think of what your favorite meal is, and then just consider how you can make that vegan, and just get creative in the kitchen. It can be really, really fun. And I think also like, joining a gym, having somebody do it with you is really helpful. You can keep each other going. It makes it more fun. And I've definitely found the community, having a kind of supportive community, really helpful, because I was the only person in my family that went vegan. I still am, actually. My husband is now vegan, and so it really helped me to. I had one vegan friend who was sort of vegan and vegetarian on and off, but apart from that, I joined a lot of the social media food pages, and that sort of excitement for all the new kind of products and recipes and things sort of keeps you going.
Yeah, have it. I like how you compare it to going to the gym, because people always say that, don't they? If you've got the motivation of someone else, then you can try and succeed. Emily, what about with Power Food? Do you give the option to have plant-based options? I know you really look into your supply chain and sustainably and locally sourced food, but is plant-based an option that's popular with Power?
It is, and it has been incredibly, like, over the last couple of years, it's grown. So we've always offered plant-based and encouraged options, and then but with all our jobs, there'll always be a plant-based option.
Yeah.
And we're completely dairy free predominantly, and then with our ready meals, we've got plant-based options as well. One thing I would say, working with a lot of nutritionists, what we really kind of cared about, because there was a point when I went vegan as well, and then I was vegetarian. And I think for the younger generations, they hear a lot of messaging, and they're influenced by kind of shifting their diet in that way, and not. I mean, you said the word research. I think they're not educated in it in a way that's sustainably healthy for them. So I think there is a transition into going vegan, and there's an initial lack of certain nutrients and having to supplement them. For some people, supplements are expensive. So I think it's looking into what you need, and what you should be eating. And also, I think a lot of people go vegan, but towards junk food options, which can be quite malnourishing down the line. If you're going for lots, like a gluten meat alternative, which has like 25 ingredients in it. So I think shifting towards finding out really good whole protein sources, beans, pulses. I think naturally when you shift to veganism, you're eating more fruit and vegetables, and your water content goes up naturally, so you're going to feel great. But a couple of months later, you have some counter effects of it, which you need to supplement with other sources and make sure you're getting the amino acids in, and the proteins that you need, especially if you're a teenage girl who's starting to menstruate, and suddenly you've got a lack of iron and a lack of other things that you don't get in a lot of the replacements. So we always offer plant-based options at POW, but we use they're all from natural sources. So we cook with a lot of beans and pulses, and we use molasses and nutritional yeast to enrich with B vitamins, and tempeh and tofu. So and then it's about using, I suppose, the right oils and seeds and nuts, because nuts and things can be incredibly expensive and not the best for the environment if you're using loads of them. But it's about kind of having the right variety of proteins and aminos. So yeah, we push it and we try and educate and really work with our nutritionists around it to create the right messaging, because obviously, like, it's a shift that I think we should be eating a lot more plant-based and vegan, but in the right way, because from a nutritional standpoint, I've seen a lot of people who haven't quite done it the right way, and I just wish that there's some more guidance from a nutritional standpoint.
I think I could see when you said about people sort of eating junk food, I could see Nishat smiling and nodding. And I think with all the launches of vegan ranges at supermarkets, suddenly, if you're vegan, you can get a vegan burger and a vegan, I don't know, fake chicken nugget and things like this. And I remember speaking to someone who was vegan who said, 10 years ago when I went vegan, it was like they were cooking all vegetables and using the pulses and grains, like you said, Emily. And now there's that sort of easy option. So people coming in to being vegan now might see these sort of whole plant-based range and just think not look at the
ingredients.
Yeah. did you experience that, Nisha, or have you had people in the society who sort of agree?
No, so when I went vegan, I think it was like 6 years ago now, and there weren't as many options, and I used to wish there were more sort of junk food options, but now they're sort of coming in. It is really exciting, and I still do love, my junk food and treats here and there. I do really like regularly find myself just craving going back to like the simple dishes, like the beans and pulses, like you're saying. I don't know, I feel like my body just sort of craves that kind of the more nutritional dishes after a while of sort of indulging in the kind of processed foods. As fun and as exciting as they are, it's not like an everyday thing we should be doing. Absolutely not. And I find that I get more creative when I cook with simple, more sustainable ingredients, and I can sort of make them taste better sometimes, because I sort of really think about the flavors and what would go together. But yeah, I definitely agree. We should. It's not sustainable on a long-term basis to just rely on like junk foods and things. And it's really important for us to sort of get to know our food and cook it ourselves, if we can, and have the time and the resources. The Vegan Society actually has some dietitians to hand that are always like available to offer advice and things. And we have lots of blogs on things like that as well.
Yeah, there's loads of resources on there for people to sort of get clued up. And that's the thing, like Ruth was saying, we're getting to that stage where we're seeking out this information to try and learn more. And Ruth, and when it comes to sort of veganism, vegetarianism at Sustain, what's your standpoint when it comes to people sort of changing their diets and the food they eat?
Yeah, well, I completely agree. It's been really good to see the growth in the vegan. And every year there's new vegan products cropping up, and that's a result of our pressure. That is it. The difference that has happened because more people, vegans and non-vegans, are asking for vegan products, and I'm looking forward to I'm looking forward to the next 3 or 4 years when that is doubled, and when suddenly that starts to become, when they become healthier and we start to get those becoming a little bit like, it's not just something that's part of the ultra processed diet, but it becomes more the norm in ready meals and sandwiches and all the rest of it. And that will only happen, from our continued pressure. And I want to see the time when it's not something for vegans, it's for meat eaters as well to choose healthy and sustainable alternatives. I think it's great. Not much more to say about the vegan stuff because the other two have talked about it really well. But if you're, if you're not, the reality is that for many people, won't go vegan straight away. But that doesn't mean that there's nothing you can do. And if you can use Veganuary as an opportunity to start habits that you'll carry on all the rest of the year. Like choose one meat-free day at least, or just have meat at the weekend, or immediately switch to organic milk and start getting it delivered by a milk delivery rather than using the supermarkets. Start to get bread from your bakery rather than using the supermarkets. You can immediately start using a veg box or a veg bag from a local grower so that you're not using air freighted veg. And so you start to get used to what's in season, because what you get in your bag is what will be grown in season. And that will give you a much greater awareness of the kind of food that's grown in your soil, in your area, seasonally, and they're doing the heavy lifting for you. You don't have to worry about what's in season because that's happening for you. So yeah, think about, if you're not going to go vegan, what can you do that's a few steps in the right direction?
And I think that's a good sort of point to move on to, because all of you have discussed sustainability, and not just like the food we're eating, but sort of how and where we get it in some of your answers. So how else, I was going to ask, can people take into the planet when it comes to the food that they're buying, eating out, or the food that they're cooking at home? Maybe Ruth, you wanted to carry on that one, because you just mentioned a few there. So shopping, getting locally, getting vegetables that are in season, for example, is one, and learning how and where to get them from. I know there's a few people in place that I live who are starting to get odd box, and I was like, oh, odd box, what's that? And you can see they just get sent a box of amazing vegetables every week.
Yeah, Oddbox is brilliant. It's boxes of veg that don't meet the cosmetic standards of supermarkets generally, or that are over orders. The supermarket system, we've been led to believe, is really efficient and gets us cheap food, but we don't see the hidden cost of the system, which is huge waste from over ordering and overproduction and cosmetic standards. And waste in the supply chain, where it sits in a distribution center for 2 or 3 days and then is wasted before it reaches your fridge. Whereas an alternative system, which is a veg bag or a veg box, fewer intermediaries, quicker into your fridge, means it lasts longer with lower waste. So Oddbox is a really good way of helping fruit and veg that would otherwise be in the bin. So great. The other thing you can do is, so I like to think about it now that we've decided that we're not feeling guilty about our food choices anymore, is think about where your purchase will have power. So it won't in a supermarket or in a large high street chain of restaurants, but an independent restaurant, it will, and an independent shop or a high street, a smaller business, it will. So you can go in and then you can ask questions about where the food comes from, and people will listen because you're talking to somebody who owns the shop locally. So you can ask where the chicken is from, and if they haven't got an answer, you can choose the vegetarian or the vegan option, and that's made a difference. So I would say, yeah, try to think about, we all have to eat, right? So we can use the spend every day that we spend on food to try to make a positive difference to the environment and the community and our communities. So I've already mentioned VegBox, which I think is a great one because it's completely lazy. The second is, think about if you are going to eat fish, think very carefully about the fish that you buy, because lots of the fish is red rated and that is sold in the UK. You can readily get fish which is red rated, which is considered to be either seriously overfished or endangered. So look at the Marine Conservation Society's ratings, and if you don't know, then don't buy it. And look for the Marine Stewardship Council's blue tick as well, or try to use a direct to fishery. I use a really good one called Soul Share, but there's lots where they'll deliver fish either to a local shop or directly to you, and that means that you're supporting directly fishing communities, which have had a really tough time over Brexit. I think that's it. Yeah, buy local. I can show you if I think of any more, but do anybody else have anything to throw in there?
Nishat, did you want to
go? So I think to piggyback off your Oddbox, the veg boxes, I think they're great because, and I think you realise as well when you eat the seasonal vegetables, you notice that they taste better. We've actually recently started using those kind of recipe boxes. Because I sort of lose motivation to cook in the winter. But I found they've really helped because you sort of get the exact amounts and you get new recipe ideas. And we've kind of purposely gone for things that don't have all the kind of processed vegan food alternatives. So it's mostly just vegetables and grains and things. And that's really helped. And I think definitely there's a lot to be said for like being really mindful of like waste. So like I like to like every week go through the fridge and see what's left over, and even like cupboards and what I could put together and make meals out of. And I've honestly found that when I make a meal from leftovers, they're always the best meals.
Where do you have any advice for where people go on tips on how to do that? Because I have done that before, but sometimes I'm just like, I just don't know what I would do. Do you I don't know, put it all in a pasta, or is there how do you sort of think up what you could use your leftovers for?
I know this is like really personal to me, but I always just go back to my childhood, and like, because there's certain like foods that I miss, and sometimes it's just because of like the smell or the memories attached to it. I remember I used to love this fish stew that my mum used to make. It was really tomatoey and tangery, and it had, I think, sardines in it, but obviously I couldn't have that now. But I had like a tin of jackfruit leftover and lots of tomatoes. I was like, I could make that, and I sort of spoke to my sister and my mum and got like, it was very difficult. They never give exact measurements, so and I suppose that was good for me in a way because I got to like I had to like constantly taste as I was going along, and I used the jackfruit as the kind of fish alternative in that, and it was really good. I think just try to begin with, like even and like taste as you go along. I'd say like follow as many like food accounts as possible on Instagram and Twitter. I do that. Even like I think that I found I was still following some non-vegan food accounts from before, but I sort of still get ideas, and I just think, oh, I could swap that for this. Yeah, I think just watch as like consume as much content. I think there's I know the internet gets a lot of slack, but I think it's great for inspiration and sort of taking the control into your own hands.
Yeah, definitely. And Emily, so when it comes to like what else people can do to try and be sustainable in the food they eat and buy, I know with POW, you, like I said, you look into your supply chains and make sure it's locally sourced. And what Nishat was just saying, you are a meal delivery service as well. So I'm guessing that in itself reduces waste from people buying the boxes.
Yeah, I think yeah, definitely. Something that we're trying to work with is our food is our ready meals are flash frozen, and there's a stigma still attached to frozen food that we're trying to change, because I mean, a lot of obviously frozen food can be, you know, loaded with, you know, it's seen as a cheaper option, and perhaps loaded with you know, preservatives and added salt and sugar and things like that. But actually, in essence, freezing food not only can be more nutritional, because you're locking in the nutrients and it's not oxidizing in the fridge for 3 days. Because if you think about a lot of food, especially ready meals, the reason why it can last so long in a fridge is quite concerning. So there's that. So, but bringing that into a consumer, you know, on a consumer basis about how you can be a bit more sustainable with what you're buying is we look at food that if you're buying in bulk or you're buying larger amounts, freeze part of it. You can buy frozen vegetables. They're still incredibly nutritious and they're cheaper, because a lot of, you know, fresh, I mean, I'm all for fresh veg, but a lot of fresh veg, by the time it's got to you, it's lost a lot of its nutritional value. It's been cut, it's oxidized, and it's been packaged, and it's unnecessary packaging when you're buying 3 apples. Also, you know, something like that. So where you can buy in bulk, freeze. If you can't buy in bulk, look at the packaging you're buying with, you know, for smaller amounts of food. And then yeah, what was the
I just when you were talking about POW, I know you really focus on you're the head of sustainability, so you're focusing on sort of your supply chains and and getting them locally sourced. This might come into account of what Ruth was saying of asking questions. Perhaps people would ask questions of I don't know, small brands or businesses about how they source their food. So that's something you take into account when sort of building POW itself.
Oh yeah, no, definitely. So we have, I mean, we're very transparent through our website and with the meal deliveries. And then, so everything from sort of like the packaging and how we keep it insulated is, that's all completely compostable. We're trying to work out a way that people can send them back now for, you know, a discount on the next purchase. Then with the food itself, I mean, obviously in food prep, there's always going to be waste, but we try and look at ways that, you know, any of the food that we have going to waste gets used in some of our other products like banana bread and things like that. And aside from that, we use ReFood. So we pay for a delivery service every week where all of our food produce waste gets sent to be converted into fertilizer for plants. So for crops, and so that's we do things like that, and then we in our booklets and things where we send out to our consumers, we give them little tips and we tell them what we do. And aside from that, yeah, the food is frozen, so it lasts longer in a freezer. You know, the meals can last 3 to 6 months, and they're still incredible quality. You can still eat them, and you know, you've got more, you know, less likelihood of wasting the food. So yeah,
definitely. We had a I was just thinking of what you said about the stigma around frozen, and I wonder why there is a stigma around frozen food, because there's in lockdown there was a Thai restaurant near us, and they had like a Thai supermarket on it, and they decided to, because they had a lot of food, cook cook all the food and then freeze them, and they were selling off frozen curries, but they would say, oh, have a big packet on, here's when it was made, you should eat it by this is how you defrost it. So loads of people in the community where I live were getting these frozen curries, and I was just thinking, this is amazing, because all this food that could have gone to waste because the restaurant had to close down. So I freeze a lot. Freezing is great. I just wondered if we could, there were quite a few questions coming in. Nishat, no pressure, but there's quite a lot about being vegan. But I just wondered if we could sort of whip around all of us and say, if someone said to you, I want to eat more sustainably this year, what piece of advice, any piece of advice would you give to me around food? What would you say? And it can be anything. It could be about food waste. It could be about the food you eat. It could be about what you buy. Ruth, I'll come to you first. What would be your sparkly piece of advice for?
Well, we've talked a lot about veganism, but we should talk about meat, because the reality is that most people do eat meat, and if you do, that is where that you should think about. That's where your biggest impact on the environment is. So you should, if you're not going to get rid of it completely, you should think about what you are eating meat wise. So go for organic, pasture fed or free range, wherever you can. And if that means that you have to eat less because it's more expensive, great. So less and better approach to meat. And then the same goes with dairy. So start using organic and from a milk person. I think that's a really good change to make. Start, go back to using a recyclable glass milk bottles, milk delivery. Thanks.
It's a good milk deliveries. I feel like they've sort of got more popular over the past few years. I remember sort of as a kid, it's something that was around, and then I just missed it. And then I've noticed just in London, there are sort of milk deliveries that go around and really affordable. So it's sort of, those are sort of switches that are seem affordable and easier. Emily, what would you say?
I completely agree with what Ruth said. We've covered that one. I'd say aside from that, I mean, I'd say look into the country you're sourcing your products from. So if you're in a supermarket, look at where they've been imported from and try and buy more locally, and just use that little stepping stone. That's if you are in a supermarket. And then if you can support your local shops and suppliers.
Definitely. Nishat, what would you say about if people they're seeing 2022 as a rebrand of how they eat food and they want to be more sustainable?
So I'd actually, a lot of what Emily said about the frozen meals has got me thinking, if you are thinking of going vegan and you're worried about cooking ideas, or that you don't have a lot of time to cook, I think the vegan frozen meal kit things are they're amazing. And I think, I don't agree with the stigma with freezing. I freeze a lot of like leftovers and things that even like when I get takeaway and there's some left, I'll just freeze the rest of it. So I think and to know that there's a service that will kind of provide a more kind of healthier, sustainable option, that's great. I'd also say sort of master the basics. Write down like all your favorite dishes and a few simple like lunches and meals that you're going to keep going back to, and try to master those. Find out a few like sort of products that that you can grab on the go. If you look for the Vegan Society's vegan trademark, it's our certification scheme. That's an easy way to sort of find a vegan product if you're in a hurry and you don't have the time to prepare something beforehand. And if you're worried about nutrition and getting all the right ingredients, you can get the Vegan Society's multivitamin. It's called Veg1, and it's got your vitamin D in it, which we should all be taking, especially in the UK, because we don't get a lot of sun and sort of spending less time outdoors. And it's got your B12 and a load of other nutrients in there. I find that's always sort of a comfort if you feel like you don't know enough about food and what you should be getting daily and things like that. And there's lots more I could say, but I don't want to go on.
It's hard, isn't it? I mean, this is a huge topic and we've got 1 hour, so it's hard to cram a lot in, but I feel like there's already been so many small tips and practical advice that people can take away. One thing I was thinking as people were talking is, and some of us have touched on it, that affordability is a huge issue, not necessarily issue when it comes to trying to eat more sustainably, because, for example, buying a a locally sourced veg box might be more expensive than getting your veg from Lidl, Lidl and Aldi sometimes do veg for about 19p. Obviously, when it comes to food waste and making up things from the food in your fridge, that could save you money because you're making food out of dinners out of food that otherwise would have gone to waste. What would you say to people who, and this is open to anyone, who are sort of trying to balance their wanting to eat better for the environment and buy better food with not wanting to double their monthly food bill? Maybe Ruth, you could take that one, because I know you said a good point, which is what made me think of it, which is if you have to buy less good meat, do that.
Yeah, I mean, this is something that really gets me fuming, because we're told that cheap food is necessary as a solution to poverty. Because people are poor, we need cheap food. No, people are poor. Many people are poor in the UK because of a cheap food system. Some of the most exploited workers in the UK and globally are in the food system, slave-like conditions in the food system. And in the UK at the moment, Deliveroo and Just Eat workers are on strike because they're not receiving a minimum wage for delivering food that's kept people going through COVID. It's a cheap food system that is causing poverty, and yet we hear politicians saying that cheap food is a solution to poverty, and we need to keep food cheap so that people can afford to eat. No, we need a system that is. We need to value food better. We need higher wages and higher benefits in the UK so that people can live a decent life, and so that everybody has the choice and the opportunity to be able to afford a good diet. That's the simple. There is no excuse for cheap food. It's a failing of our economy, not a solution to it. But having said that, because that's not exactly what you asked, there's people on low incomes, you just go for the ones that are going to save you money at the same time as helping the environment, and that's certainly reducing food waste, less and better meat, and then switching, of course, to ingredients that are lower priced. I think also the supermarkets have sort of convinced us that they're the cheapest, but the markets near us, covered market and street market, is where you can get the cheapest fruit and veg near me, certainly. I think we think they've convinced us that they're the cheapest, but I don't know if they are always. It's a bit of a myth, I think.
But not having that guilt, that this all goes back to guilt, doesn't it? I was just thinking of if the system itself is flawed, then we shouldn't feel constant guilt about not always buying, I don't know, the best meat, or meat that's not impacting, or groceries not impacting, but trying to not have the guilt on our individual actions. Emily, what would you say about affordability when it comes to being more sustainable with our diets?
Well, it really upsets me as well. I think we're looking at kind of it depends which kind of community groups we're looking at, and so if we're looking at the real lower end of the spectrum, people who don't have cooking facilities and find it difficult to pay for their energy to be able to cook, and don't have the education to know what to do, they're the people who find it a lot easier to spend £1 and go to a fish and chip shop or something like that and spend money on that kind of food. I think that there needs to be like more accessible and more awareness around shopping at markets and things like that. I think is also, if you're that end of the spectrum, then use it's the use of local resources like food banks and city harvest and charities who can give prepped food that doesn't always need to be cooked. And then if you're if you're someone who's buying a lot of cheaper meat and fish and kind of poorer quality produce, then it's about cutting down on the lower quality produce and buying less of the high quality, like Ruth was saying, and then being clever about where you're buying your carbs and fresh produce from. And it's buying frozen vegetables and things instead of fresh vegetables, which as nutritional.
Can be cheaper, And Nishat, do you have sort of the issue of food being more affordable, or people asking about affordability when it comes to vegan diets?
Yeah, I think there can be a bit of a misconception that I think Ruth touched on this earlier about veganism being seen as like an elitist diet or it's more expensive. I think it can be if you're constantly buying processed meats and alternatives and things like that. But I've personally found it to be cheaper just because I do like to eat like pulses and beans and a lot of tinned food. I find it like I just find it easier as well. I think if you're not able to sort of cook often, because I know not a lot of people can, and if you can't get down to your local market, the yellow sticker aisle in supermarkets is your best friend, I think.
Yes.
I got like melons for like 10p the other day, like a whole load of slices, and yeah, it's and because that food, if no one sort of buys that, they would end up wasting it anyway and chucking it. So that's a good way to sort of get rid of that sort of waste, and then you'd get it cheaper as well. But yeah, like Emily said, definitely it's the knowledge as well, just knowing what to do with ingredients and food. And I think that's where social media is great, because you can get the little snippets of tips and things, and blogs and stuff. We've got loads of resources on our website that's I've personally found super helpful in the past as well. But yeah, I think
Great. And I feel like I'm going to stick with you, Nisha, just because I'm going to go to the questions, and they have been very vegan related. Anyone can answer them, but someone has asked, what would your best piece of advice be for a newly converted vegan like me?
I think my best piece of advice is master some basics, because then you'll always have those to go back to, and sort of educate yourself on the reasons why it's a good choice to make, because you'll always fall back on it. So whether that's your ethical stance and the compassion side of things, just remind yourself of that, and you kind of find yourself remembering your purpose for it in the first place. And then obviously the environmental, and it can be better for your health as well. I personally found that I got better in a load of different sort of health aspects. Yeah, I'd say those things, just having as much knowledge as possible, but obviously not overwhelming yourself all at once. Just reminding yourself of the reason why. And then the practical things, like having a few basics mastered, like a good soups and quick lunches, your favorite childhood meal.
Yeah. And Ruth and Emily, you might be able to answer this. Someone has said, what do you think is the biggest obstacle for people going vegan or vegetarian? Is there anything that comes? Yes, Ruth is nodding. Is there anything that comes to mind when you think of obstacles? And it might be from experience or of people that you know.
Yeah, well, I think it's the availability and accessibility of good options, of good vegan options, I think, and that's something we can all help with by all asking, but also remember, it comes back to remember who is responsible for what we have in front of us, and it's not our own fault if we can't find the food that we really want to eat, and we make bad choices, whatever. But I think I would say at the moment that it feels like there's this kind of it's becoming a bit of a sort of like, if you're vegans versus farmers sort of discussion, like you must be anti-farmer if you're vegan. I've seen it in the certain newspapers, certainly, and I think it's important to just say, like, crush that now and say, like, it's not vegans that are causing the problem for British farmers at the moment. It's not vegans that are causing the spike in grain prices, or the fact that there's a labour shortage, or the fact that supermarkets are squeezing the prices so that farmers are struggling to make ends meet. We both have, like, vegans and farmers both have both a common enemy, and that is big businesses in the food system that are too powerful and they're kind of crushing everybody underneath. So we have there is no one versus the other. We are both trying to achieve the same thing, which is a better food system for everybody.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And it's like you said before, we shouldn't be pitting groups or labeling groups or putting labels of them going against each other. But as a lot of people have a similar aim.
Yeah.
Emily, what would you say? Do you think when it comes to obstacles to going vegan or vegetarian?
I'd say, I don't know, because I feel like there's growing options, but I think I'm being based in London. I'm spoiled for choice.
Yeah,
We all are. I think as you branch out of London, it's a very different game. So I think that is obviously like still a huge a huge struggle for people out of London, where I have noticed that the choices are still very scarce. And then I suppose it's creating a habit, and it's I think potentially kind of a couple of weeks or a couple of months down the line, it's then craving things that you've been lacking, and that's usually due to a deficiency of some sort, or so it's finding out what that is and just getting the the advice and education you need there. So I think they're probably things that are stopping in track. But there's wealth of information now, through online resources and things. So it's just about looking in the right places. And I think potentially at schools or in workplaces, or there should be more information out there now that it's a growing shift in our societies of people going to more plant-based vegan diets.
One thing that this might be something that people would research, but Nishat, someone's asked, we've been told that protein found in eggs, meat, and milk is good for development, and to build strength. Isn't it healthier to reduce these rather than eliminate them? What would you, and when it comes to sort of keeping protein in your diet, is that something you have resources about, or you have learned more about since going vegan?
Yeah, I've definitely learned more. I don't want to say too much on the health side because I'm not, a dietitian or expert, but we do have dietitians that could kind of expand on this much more. But I think there's this kind of misconception that vegans don't get a lot of protein, and that was like one of my biggest obstacles actually when I first went vegan, was people asking me that. But actually, a lot of the protein that we consume through dairy is sort of, it almost is secondhand, because the animals that we get it from plants, and I just think, well, we could just get it directly from plants. So I think that's sort of, it just seems counterintuitive to me to get it through like a second source. And yes, there's lots of like protein rich plant-based foods, soya, broccoli, lots of grains. Like probably not saying like the best ones, but there are loads. And I personally found when I cut out dairy, especially, and meat, I had quite bad asthma. I barely have it now, and I do feel like it's to do with that, because that's the first sort of thing that I cut out. So it's not, I think we're kind of told that from when we're young, so it's hard to sort of let go of that sort of bit of information that we need it. We absolutely need it, but there are plant sources of protein, and definitely you can survive on a healthy vegan diet.
And it's like everyone said during this whole hour, it's about research and equipping yourself with the education that you might need, speaking to dietitians, speaking to nutritionists. We are not nutritionists, like you said, but it's research. It's research. We have a minute or so to go, so I just wanted to go around and say, if people want to find out more about your organization, what you're doing, where can they go? And please feel free to share social media handles, websites, whatever. So Ruth, I'll come to you first. Where can people go to find out more about you or Sustain?
Thanks so much. Well, we've actually got a campaign running at the moment to try to get more healthy and sustainable meals in the public sector, which is so important, because at the moment, the stories about if you're a vegan in certain schools, you just get, instead of spaghetti bolognese, they're just getting spaghetti. There's also, we really want the public sector, so taxpayers' money spent on meals in schools and hospitals, to be spent on better food. So please go to sustainweb.org and take action there. You can write to your MP. Thanks very much.
Lovely, thank you. And Emily, what about finding out more about you and POW?
Hello, if you want to find out some more about POW Food and our home delivery options or catering for events, etc., then you can head to powerfood.co.uk, where you can also find more information about our whole philosophy and everything I've been speaking around here with sustainability.
Lovely, thank you. And Nishat, what about the keen people doing Veganuary or vegans who are interested to find out more? Where can they go?
You can go to vegansociety.com. We actually recently launched the Vegan Education Network, and that's working on things like getting more vegan education in schools. So I think that's going to be really helpful. And there's also obviously our social media channels. We have the original Vegan Society on Instagram and Vegan Trademark on Instagram, and then we also have Twitter as well. And there's always like a wealth of information and blogs and guides and things like that for easy vegan swaps and vegan Christmas. We had recently. We've got one in February coming out on cheese and wine. So that might be exciting for some people.
Lovely. Thank you very much. And thank you all for joining and taking an hour out of your lunchtime to join the Smiley Talk. We'll be putting links to where everyone works on our social media channels, so you can follow them. But other than that, thank you very much for listening. And we hope you had got some inspiration from the talk today and some tips to take away. Thank you.